Hello there guys, it's Joey, and today's video is going to be musing about happiness. I sort of did this for the musing about love card, and I thought it actually makes a lot of sense to sit and muse a bit about the notion of happiness, because when you actually sit down and really start to think about it, it's actually a really complex notion. It's basically a very personal feeling, a very personal expression of self, which is all dependent on our individual natures, experiences, feelings, preferences, and yet we all have this sort of mutual understanding of what it is. But when you think about it and you sit down and you go, well, what is happiness? And you're not allowed to answer happiness is a thing, then it becomes interesting. The difference between temporary euphoria and true happiness. Happiness free from any form of addictive behaviour, which can be considered unhealthy. Happiness which perhaps isn't innately a selfish thing. And it becomes very, very abstract, and we have all these sort of clues and triggers of what it is to be happy. Physical reactions, the smile being the most obvious, the upbeat tone of voice being another, light in the eyes being another, particular types of behaviour being another. And then you start to think, have we conditioned those sorts of behaviours as what is acceptable behaviour when we are being happy, when we are pleased, when we are content, when all of our needs are filled? And what is the difference between having your needs met and happiness? Is there a gulf of difference between these things, or is that just an emotional reaction to having those things filled? Yeah. So when I was sitting here thinking about it, I was thinking about how abstract it actually is, and how interesting it is that really our happiness is an isolated experience, because only we know what it is to feel happy for us. And I say this frequently, and I sometimes get nasty remarks about it, but the only person whom I can speak for in my spiritual path is me. I'm not going to speak for anybody else. I haven't lived their life, I haven't felt what they feel. I can empathise, but that's the most you can do. Sympathise, empathise, understand to a degree. But you are not said other person, and therefore all of the experiences, feelings, comments in here are mine, and to address that any other way to me would seem not only misguided but foolish. I can't speak for anybody else. So I was thinking, where does the idea of what makes us happy come from? Like, what really, I don't know, brings us joy in things. And I was sat here mulling over the notion of it, and I was thinking about growing up. And it's interesting because growing up I was always afraid of being happy, because I was always under the impression that the minute I allowed myself to feel happy, even for a moment, then something terrible would happen. And that's awful for a child growing up, but unfortunately there is a basis in truth. I had unfortunate circumstances growing up, and being happy or being overtly happy with a situation was a surefire trigger to more abuse. And that's unfortunate. And I was thinking how sad that is, and where all this conditioning comes from in our childhood. And I was thinking, even now, I'm incredibly wary of situations that seem too good to be true. I have to be open and giving to people who are just decent, nice human beings, because I've had such trouble with people who appear to be nice, decent human beings and aren't, who are, you know, creating trouble, going behind people's backs, lying, manipulating, gossiping, but all the while pretending to be sweet as pie. I've had that happen to me recently, and over the period of my lifetime, over and over again. And it's why I value honesty so much. And I was thinking, it's interesting how we get these ideas, these notions, these conditionings of what makes us happy or not. And quite frequently they're almost in a destructive way. Like, we get attached to things and addicted to things, thinking that that's where true happiness lies. That, you know, the forms of escapism that most of us engage in some form or another. I know an awful lot about comfort eating. It's been a problem of mine as long as I can remember. And you talk to people who comfort eat or have problems with food, and they attain a sense of euphoria from food. They feel better for having eaten whatever it is, and they crave whatever it is to make them feel better. And it is very much like being addicted to anything else. Alcohol and drugs and self-harm and all these sort of release addictions, which are ultimately bad for us, to attain some sort of happiness, because somewhere along the lines we don't think we either deserve happiness, or we've been told what we should be happy about and we're not happy about it, or we haven't obtained those things we are told we are supposed to want or need to be happy. A prime example from my life is I have never ever wanted to drive, and some of it stems back to nonsense with my mother, as a lot of things in my life do, which basically comes from the scenario that she pressured me to start driving, and whereas she paid for all my sister's lessons and her bills and the first bit of the car, I got nothing, and I was told I would have to pay for it all myself. And at that point I had a part-time job on a Saturday and a Sunday, and it would have been all my wage, and it wasn't something I was willing to do. And to this day I just don't really care about it. I think public transport is fine. It's not ideal, but it's fine. You can get around the country fine with the buses and the trains and things. And yes, whilst it might make life easier in a lot of respects, it's just not something I really care about. And to a lot of people do not understand that, and, you know, people need car. And to me, it's like all the big ticket items that we actually talk about quite frequently, we don't need as much as we think we do. Obviously, we need a safe environment in which to live, and being safe and secure is possibly the foundation or the basis for happiness, not feeling constantly on edge about, I don't know, not having somewhere to live or whatever. But the other big ticket items and things, you know, diamonds and cars and things of that nature, I'm not as interested in. I obviously prefer the new agey stuff, and because, you know, there's been a lot of calling crystals new age rather than pagan, which I don't really care one way or the other. I think this determination to label everything and snub everything that's going on right now is ridiculous. And if you enjoy crystals or you enjoy herb work, or you enjoy whatever aspect of your witchcraft, then you shouldn't have to justify it. And that's something that I think is really sad, that keeps coming up. This need to have justifiable happiness, to justify everything we like or do or say, and as if we're being held accountable to other people's ideas of what we should or should not want, or what should or should not make us happy. A lot of times things that make us happy might be silly, frivolous, and some people call it downright weird. I've grown up in a culture where a lot of the things that I think are fun or enjoyable or silly or whatever have actually been poo-pooed, because a lot of them are considered to be geeky, which is a little bit more accepted now, or other, or weird, or a lot of people, paganism and witchcraft is considered weird, and there is a very negative portrayal of witchcraft and pagans going on right now, which is really, really sad, and doesn't add to my happiness. And it's interesting how the concept of happiness sort of spreads over two sorts of categories. One is very, very much based in things around us, be they material goods, be they a home, be it the location in which we live, the people we interact with, very physical things. And then others things are very much more abstract, the things that, make us happy in a much more abstract sense, a much more, I don't know, perhaps a much more emotional state. That's how people can make us feel, and how certain situations make us feel, and happiness that can and cannot be gleaned. And another thing I really, really wanted to touch on was the idea of happiness and personal responsibility. For a long time I had difficulty with the notion of you are responsible for your own happiness. I struggled with that notion for a long time, and it's only in more recent weeks even that I have come to the point where I am embracing the truth of that. Whereas we cannot be responsible for the actions of other people, we are responsible for our own happiness. And if certain situations, people, jobs, or whatever make us truly miserable and truly take away from our personal happiness, then we can always, nearly always, do something about it. We can train ourselves up on the side, we can remove people from our lives, remove situations from our lives. I understand that for some people that the real problems of physical debt, money, are a huge problem. If, for example, you're locked into 3 jobs and you have to do it to survive because you're living below the poverty line, then what are you going to do about that scenario? It's very difficult, but there are people who go through those situations and train themselves up to get better wages and whatnot. I'm not really a personal life coach or anything of that nature, but action can be taken. It's just finding what that action is, finding what's available, finding what your options are. And in terms of allowing other people to poison your soul, this is something I have personal experience with. There are people who you are not going to get along with, I've said this before, and then there are people who you're not going to agree with. Interestingly enough, apparently disagreeing with people has now come under the whole misconception that somehow because you disagree with someone's point of view on something means that you must no longer speak to them or be friends with them, and you can't have differing opinions without, you know, breaking a friendship. And that's just selfishness. That's an egotistical form of belief in yourself that you're always right and they are always wrong, without giving them even a shadow of a doubt that their opinion is valid. And you may not like their opinion, but you don't have to take it into yourself. And if you are taking it into yourself and becoming angry and whatever, then something is going on to the point with you where you are allowing yourself to be unhappy. You're allowing yourself to react. And I know how difficult it is not to allow that to happen, because I've been there. A person who I invited into my life and has been gone from my life since May left a crippling void in my life, and I was miserable. But the problem for me is I can't live in that past, and it's not in my future unless I invite it in my future, which I'm not going to. And I have to keep it from my present. There's no point in looking for these people, whether they're on YouTube doing videos, whether they're writing blogs, whether they're on Facebook. What is the point in taking in information which is only going to make you react more negatively? It's madness, and it's not going to help you. It's only going to make you miserable and angry, and it just keeps perpetuating this negative cycle of poisoning yourself, rather than, okay, that clearly I don't get on with this person or this situation or this job. What can I do to remove myself from it completely until I can embrace that and realize my own personal happiness is more important than knowing this stuff, than knowing all the gripes and moans and slights and insults. It's being firm within yourself and your belief and your own self and what makes you happy and your values, that it doesn't allow anything to threaten that just because somebody has said so. I have people telling me nonsense all the time, and the best thing to do is laugh about it. I swear to God and Goddess. The best thing you can do when someone tells you that you can't do this, or you can't be that, or you're not this, or you're not that, or you're not good enough, or you're insult, is to laugh and say, whatever, dude, I don't really care what you think. You don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to acknowledge it at all. You can just laugh and walk. And seriously, you will be so much happier for it. Happiness to me is moments. There are moments of happiness. Happiness, I don't think, is a state of being. I know there are spiritual practitioners who will say, you know, it's a state of being, and you can attain it all the time through this, that, and the other, and positive thoughts and intentions and things. But I don't think I full on by that. I think for me, happiness is a series of moments. There are moments of pure happiness and joy, and the art of it is recognizing them and enjoying them for what they are. We're all going to have hardships, we're all going to have pain and sorrow and sadness, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's part of the human experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience, and I think that's what a lot of people forget. You are meant to be having these human reactions and experiences. However, you're also in charge of those reactions and experiences. Who you are depends on how you behave and what you do, as well as who you are in your head and what you think. I don't buy those things that say you're not who you say you are, you're what you do. I understand the idea of that, but you are who you are, whether you are saying it, doing it. And if your behaviour doesn't match your mouth, then there's a problem, because you're being dishonest. And to be honest, I think dishonesty is a true poisoner of happiness. I cannot think of any circumstance which a dishonesty would lead to a happy situation. I just don't think it's true. I know there are people who say that, you know, sometimes white lies and whatever, and to be honest, in that situation I say you don't need to lie, you just need to be tactful. You need to know how to address a person in a positive, even pleasant manner. I just don't think dishonesty and happiness go hand in hand. I just don't buy it. And I read a quote today, and I think this is the last thing I'm going to mull over. You can't be happy until you know yourself. And it's really, really simplistic in terms of statement until you start to think about it. You can't expect happiness until you know yourself. Really, truly know thyself. And that's what the spiritual journey is all about. Knowing yourself. Connecting with the divine and an understanding of the inner as well as the outer world. For me, it needs to be the balance of the two. Happiness was never obtained either at somebody else's expense, not true happiness. I talked a little bit about this in the connecting video, in the art video, talking about discussing and understanding the artwork of the card. There is a tendency to gloat, to shove our happiness down people's throats, because somehow if they're miserable then that makes our happiness more valid, and that's not true happiness. It's just not. Happiness must come with a sense of peace within your own heart and soul. And I think this ties back to this awful societal value judgment based materialistic push on telling us what makes us happy, and that's why people gloat over things as if that somehow makes them happy, and in a very negative form of shoving material items down our throat. It's not to say that material items are the cause of all negativity and you shouldn't find happiness in material goods, because I don't believe that it is as evil as people make it out to be. If you are overjoyed in something and you are happy with it and it's bringing you joy, you want to share that, and that's coming from a positive place, then that's your personal expression of happiness about something. And that's, to me, that's fine. This is why haul videos and things of that nature don't bother me in the slightest, because if I've never seen a haul video and thought that person is shoving that down my throat. And technically that reaction is your responsibility. Again, it's you. If you're in charge of your own happiness and you know that watching these sorts of things or whatever is going to make you feel unhappy, then don't do it. Make the choice not to do it, rather than feeding that negative wolf. Feed your positive wolf. Cherokee saying. You become what you feed, internally, externally, and if you feed your own inner happiness and you go after things that make you happy and you watch things that make you happy and you engage with things and people and situations and the world and nature and whatever it is that makes you happy, then you are perpetuating your own happiness. You create a cycle of positivity. There's a whole psychological up-cycle, down-cycle spiral of happiness and depression that was around last week. And I'm very careful when I consult those sorts of things, because I think there is a value judgment placed on certain behaviours. And for most people, I'm going to say most people, negative behaviours aren't real happiness. I mean, you know, destructive behaviours aren't real happiness. I talked the other week about you can be a creative person or you can be a destructive person, and this is something that I really truly hold to, that if you are creating your own happiness, then you do that through the means of creation. You create an experience for yourself. You create your life. You don't live it. You create your life. Your life is not out of your hands. I don't ever believe in that either. And it's a personal belief, but I really don't believe in this whole, you know, sit around and twiddle your thumbs and everything will be fine. Because even if it's engaging in magic and spell crafting and positive reinforcement, positive intention and materialization from last week, then you are doing something, you're being proactive. And then you take the steps in the mundane world that get whatever you need to be done. And then you have a sense of accomplishment and you have created something. Whether it be physical or more abstract than that, rather than destroying something. No true happiness ever came at the expense of someone else. There are people out there who seem to take pleasure in the destruction of others. And that to me must mask a seriously sad and unhappy individual. I'm very honest in my reactions, and some things really anger me and some things really upset me, and I always speak my mind with them if it necessitates it. However, in recent months I've learnt that I cannot allow certain things into my soul because it's basically destroying my inner state of peace and happiness. And to allow another to destroy us is irresponsible of us in terms of our own happiness. We are giving ourselves over to someone else. And there's a whole host of quotes about, if you know, giving yourself over to someone else is not going to have your best intentions because of the innate selfishness of human beings when it comes down to you or them. Sure, there are some people who will completely selflessly give for another individual, for their children, for their partner. But all in all, it's probably the best idea to be cautious with one's personal life and safety and happiness. That is not to say that we do not trust at all, of course, and that people are always out to impact us negatively. Of course not. Of course that's not the case. And it's knowing about those real friendships that we form, real honest communications, and they bring ourselves a joy and a happiness. And going back to my own personal experiences, I've had a friend come into my life, a few friends come into my life, but the most recent one being Tracy A. Hello. Changed my life, and I had to allow that person into my life in order for that happiness to blossom. And of course, as with all friendships and all relationships and all interactions with other people, there is give and take. You know, there is dialogue, discussion, talk, give and take, back and forth. And that's probably one of the truest bases of happiness, based on personal interactions, that while there is give and take on both sides, happiness can grow from that. But that's sort of the fertile ground we were talking about yesterday, that allows things to bloom. Honest discussions, you know, they are the countermeasure of destructive behaviour that can take away from your personal happiness. Honesty being the I honestly believe that honesty is the basis for happiness. You have to be honest with yourself about what truly makes you happy and why it makes you happy, and if it's healthy or not that it makes you happy, if it's a sustainable form of happiness, or if it's just an addiction or a euphoria or a quick high sort of thing. Because quick highs or whatever, they're not going to last, and ultimately they're going to destroy you. And quick highs cover everything from destructive behaviours in forms of addiction, like physical addiction to drugs, alcohol, food, hurting yourself, whatever, to these sort of emotional addictions, which tend to be drama causing or things of that nature. So things like, you know, impulse buying and stuff like that. So there's a sort of maybe an art form even in knowing about why you're buying things, and you don't have to feel guilty about the buying things and things making you happy. I buy crystals all the time, and I've had to defend it on multiple occasions, and it's just like, you know what, if it makes me happy, then whatever, you know. And there's no guilt or shame attached to enjoying things. It's just having balance in your life, that it's not the only thing making you happy. It's the same with alcohol and food and things. You can enjoy food, you can enjoy a drink, as long as you're not overdoing it and destroying yourself and relying on it to make you happy. I think that's what it is. That if you rely on just those things, and those things are all you have to make you happy, then you're missing something. You need the balance of the physical with the more abstract that we talked about earlier. It's a weird one, isn't it? When you really start thinking about happiness and all the different facets of it, it's so multi-layered and so introspective, because it's such a personal experience. But what I'm going to say for like a final thought is, happiness is a lot like love. You can't really tell someone what it is that you feel, you just know it. And if something truly makes you happy, then do that. Many blessings.